You expect a certain level of teething problems when new regulations hit Formula One.
Absolutely, yeah, it's guaranteed.
Like, you expect some reliability issues, or maybe, I don't know, a team just completely misses the aerodynamic window.
Sure.
But you do not expect the reigning architects of the grid, the power unit manufacturer that defined the last era of dominance, to build an engine so violently flawed that it, like, physically assaults the driver.
Unbelievable, truly.
It is. Welcome to the deep dive. We are looking at a genuine existential crisis surrounding Honda's 2026 return to F1 with Aston Martin. And look, this isn't just a bad weekend.
No.
This is a catastrophe that is currently tearing up the rulebook and forcing the entire paddock into this vicious backroom political war.
Yeah, and the telemetry coming out of the early sessions is just, it's grim. It's not just a matter of being down on power, which is bad enough.
Right.
This power unit is suffering from harmonic resonance so severe, it's literally threatening the structural integrity of the car itself.
Which is terrifying.
Completely. Aston Martin is currently bleeding like 3.5 seconds to the leaders in qualifying trim. 3.5 seconds.
At F1, that's a lifetime.
It's an eternity. You have Fernando Alonso, who is arguably one of the most adaptable drivers in the history of motorsport.
No, without a doubt.
Getting lapped in Japan on Honda's home turf.
Oh, man, the optics of that.
And behind the scenes, the sheer panic has reached a level where, standard engineering protocols have just completely broken down. It's forcing the FIA to consider unprecedented regulatory bailouts just to keep the manufacturer from walking away entirely.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because you have Alonso literally shaking in the cockpit.
Yeah.
But what I don't understand is they have millions of dollars invested in state-of-the-art simulation software, right?
Yep, the best in the world.
They have these totally isolated engine test beds. How do you, as a giant like Honda, not see a vibration that violent before the car actually hits the asphalt?
Well, because an isolated engine dyno just cannot perfectly replicate the torsional stiffness and the dynamic flex of the physical Aston Martin chassis.
Okay.
When you run a modern hybrid power unit on a test rig, it's bolted to this massive rigid block. It doesn't move.
Right, it's static.
Exactly. But in the real world, on track, you're dealing with this incredibly complex interplay between the internal combustion engine and the MGUK.
The electrical deployment.
Right. The MGUK is trying to deploy just massive amounts of electrical torque directly to the crankshaft.
Yeah.
If the software mapping isn't perfectly, and I mean perfectly, synchronized with the combustion cycle, they start fighting each other.
Like pushing and pulling at the wrong exact microsecond?
Yes. And that conflict generates a destructive, high-frequency vibration. Aston Martin realized their isolated data was totally useless, which is why they did something virtually unheard of after Japan.
Right, this blew my mind.
They left an entire fully built AMR-26 channel behind at the Honda facility in Sakura.
They abandoned the car in Japan.
Just left it there.
Which means they are essentially admitting that their multi-million-dollar digital simulation loop is fundamentally broken.
Exactly. They had to physically bolt the real chassis to a custom rig in Sakura just to figure out where the math went wrong.
Wow.
But there's a brutal secondary cost to doing that. In Formula One, keeping your chassis halfway across the world means you are losing out on vital aerodynamic correlation work.
Because you can't test it in the wind tunnel back home.
Right. They are flying blind on engine development, and by sacrificing a chassis to fix the engine, they are stunting their aero development simultaneously. It's a death spiral.
And there is no quick fix coming. If you look at the setup for the Miami Grand Prix, the messaging from Honda's Shintaro Orihara and Aston's Mike Crack is it's completely devoid of optimism.
Oh, it's bleak.
Like, zero performance upgrades are on the table. None. They are frantically stripping weight. They're attempting to redesign the steering column just to isolate the driver from the vibrations and, just trying to survive the weekend. This sounds like showing up to the Olympic 100-meter dash wearing lead boots, and the coach is celebrating that they managed to tie the shoelaces.
That's a perfect analogy. And when you factor in the layout of Miami, it's a circuit notorious for baking heat and incredibly slow, traction-limited corners. The energy management profile of this engine is going to be exposed even further.
It's going to be a nightmare.
Absolute nightmare. Miami is the ultimate stress test for cooling and battery deployment. If your engine is already running inefficiently, producing excess heat instead of actual forward momentum, those slow corners will drain the electrical reserves way faster than the MGUH can recover them.
Right.
The engineers in Sakura know this, but they're trapped. Even if they identify the software bugs or the architectural flaws causing that harmonic resonance, the strict budget cap means Honda literally cannot afford to manufacture a completely redesigned power unit this season.
They just don't have the cash under the
Nope.
rules.
That financial wall is exactly why this technical crisis has spilled over into the executive offices. If the engineers can't engineer their way out of it legally, well, the executives have to change the laws.
Which brings us to the ADUO metric.
Right.
For those of you tracking the deeper cuts of the FIA sporting regulations, you might know ADUO stands for the Allowance for Development of Underperforming Units.
A very wordy acronym.
Very. It was conceived as a safety net, right, to prevent a manufacturer from being locked into a totally uncompetitive design for years. Level 1 kicks in for a 2 to 4% power deficit. Level 2 is for anything worse than 4%.
Yeah.
But Honda is so far beyond that threshold, the safety net is effectively just a string on the ground.
It is. I mean, a 4% deficit is roughly, what, 22 horsepower?
Give or take.
Honda's deficit, combined with their catastrophic reliability, makes 22 horsepower look like a rounding error. They are miles behind.
So what's the plan to fix it?
Well, the current ADUO system gives a struggling manufacturer a one-time snapshot benefit. So, perhaps a slight bump in permitted dyno hours, or a minor concession on upgrades at the start of the year.
Right, just a little boost.
Exactly. But the proposal currently being hammered out in absolute secrecy between F1 executives and the manufacturers would fundamentally alter how this entire sport operates. They want to allow these ADUO benefits to accumulate continuously across the season.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because meaning, if they evaluate Honda after race 5 and they're still a disaster, they get an allowance.
Right.
If they review them again after race 10 and they haven't caught up, they don't just get another allowance, it stacks. They get compounding development freedom.
It's an infinite cheat code.
It is. It's like watching a struggling marathon runner and deciding that giving them better shoes isn't enough, so you just let them legally skip miles of the race until they catch up to the leader.
Yeah. But what's fascinating here is that the technical allowances are only half the battle.
Oh, right, the money.
Exactly. F1 development is a zero-sum game of resources. Giving Honda permission to introduce 20 new specification changes is entirely useless if they hit the budget ceiling by the 5th change.
Because they can't build the parts.
Right. This proposed accumulating structure requires a massive, synchronized inflation of their budget cap and wind tunnel allocation. The sport is attempting to build a bespoke, holistic financial rescue package exclusively to keep Honda afloat.
Which feels entirely antithetical to the concept of meritocracy. Like, why on earth would the FIA bend the entire framework of the sport to reward an engineering department that simply got the math wrong?
Because you have to view this through the lens of the homologation cycle.
Okay.
These highly complex 2026 engine regulations are only locked in for a 5-year window, right? From 2026 to 2030.
Right, they expire.
And the paddock is already deep in discussions about abandoning this incredibly dense hybrid architecture and returning to much simpler, lighter V8 engines for 2031.
Wait, really?
Yes, a formal decision on that pivot could be finalized before this summer break.
Hold on. If they pivot to V8s in 2031, that means these hybrid units have a hard expiration date 5 years from now. They go straight into the trash.
Precisely. Now look at the precedent. When the previous V6 hybrid era began in 2014, Mercedes nailed the architecture and established a devastating baseline.
They were untouchable.
Untouchable. It took Ferrari until 2018, the 5th year of that regulatory cycle, to genuinely challenge them on pure power circuits like Spa and Monza.
And even then, it was close.
Yeah, and it is a well-understood reality within the paddock that Ferrari only managed to close that gap because Mercedes provided them with early covert technical assistance to ensure the sport didn't just collapse from a lack of competition.
Wow, so Mercedes practically helped them.
Exactly. So if Honda is starting 2026 this far behind, historical data suggests it will take them 4 to 5 years to achieve parity.
So if I'm the Honda CEO, I'm sitting in a boardroom in Tokyo. I'm looking at a spreadsheet projecting billions of dollars in development costs just to reach competitiveness by maybe 2029 or 2030. And the moment you finally build a race-winning engine, the FIA throws the entire hybrid formula in the trash and switches to V8s.
Yep.
You are literally setting billions of dollars on fire for a 5th-year participation trophy.
Which gives Honda maximum leverage. From a purely corporate standpoint, the only rational business decision is to threaten to withdraw from the sport immediately, unless the FIA provides immense immediate regulatory advantages. They have a gun to the FIA's head.
Absolutely. Formula One is terrified of the optics. Imagine Audi or Ford or Porsche observing this right now.
Right.
If the most prolific engine manufacturer on the planet returns to F1, gets publicly humiliated by the complexity of the regulations, and is forced to retreat,
It's a disaster.
the narrative becomes that Formula One is an unviable investment. F1 needs Honda to succeed to validate their own regulations.
But this is the massive catch. The moment you rewrite the rulebook to save one team, you inevitably invite the rest of the grid to exploit the exact same loophole.
Pandora's box. Right. You can't write a regulation that specifically names Honda. It has to be a blanket rule based on performance deficits.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that is where the paddock politics turn absolutely vicious.
Oh, I bet.
Toto Wolff has been incredibly vocal in recent strategy meetings, insisting that any ADUO intervention must be reserved strictly for absolute outliers,
Right.
like Honda.
Right. Keep the net low.
He is trying to build a firewall to ensure that a team sitting, say, 20 or 30 horsepower behind Mercedes cannot access these compounding development benefits.
Because, wait, a 4% deficit is roughly 22 horsepower?
Right.
And based on the current telemetry out of the Italian camps, Ferrari is sitting exactly in that window.
Yep.
They are estimated to be 25 to 30 horsepower down on the Mercedes benchmark right now.
Exactly. If the FIA passes this accumulating ADUO rule to save Honda, Ferrari crosses that 4% threshold and becomes eligible for the exact same compounding technical and financial freedoms.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Ferrari is already operating with a highly competitive aerodynamic package. If you suddenly inject them with extra budget cap space, extra dyno hours, and unrestricted upgrade allowances,
dumb, mate.
they will simply weaponize Honda's failure to artificially close their own gap to Mercedes.
Wait, so is this a rescue mission for Honda or a Trojan horse for Ferrari to steal the championship from Mercedes?
It's both. The other manufacturers aren't trying to help Aston Martin out of the goodness of their hearts. They're using Aston Martin as a battering ram to break open the budget cap for themselves. F1 is a snake pit.
So Mercedes is staring down the barrel of a regulation change that not only bails out Honda, but actively subsidizes Ferrari's championship bid. Obviously, Mercedes will fight this to the death.
Oh, yeah.
But how does the voting structure actually work when it comes to these mid-season engine regulations? Because they have to vote on this, right?
Yeah, it requires a supermajority among the engine manufacturers. 4 out of the 5 must agree to implement the change.
Okay, so Mercedes is an automatic block. They vote no.
Yep. Honda and Ferrari are guaranteed yes votes, obviously.
golly.
Renault, depending on their own deficit, will likely align with the side offering more development freedom.
Right, whatever helps them.
So that places the entire balance of power squarely in the hands of the Red Bull Ford powertrain division.
Wow. So Red Bull holds the executioner's switch here.
Completely.
If they feel secure in their own performance, or if the internal politics dictate that hurting Mercedes is more valuable than keeping Ferrari restricted, Red Bull votes yes, and the rule passes.
Yep.
It is stunning that a mathematical error in a Japanese laboratory might dictate the outcome of a championship battle between Brackley and Maranello.
It's the ultimate butterfly effect. I mean, it's incredible. But, while the executives are playing high-stakes geopolitical chess over budget caps, there is a very raw human element trapped inside the cockpit of that vibrating car.
Fernando Alonso.
Yeah. Fernando Alonso is turning 45 years old this July. He does not have a 5-year runway to wait for Honda to resolve their harmonic resonance issues.
Right. He's made it very clear that his timeline is incredibly short. He is delaying any definitive retirement announcements until the summer break. But the standard he has set for his exit is just fascinating to me.
That was very specific.
He explicitly referenced Nico Rosberg's sudden departure, stating he refuses to leave the sport with a, quote, bad taste in his mouth.
Yeah.
He wants to leave at the absolute peak of his sensory and physical abilities, feeling 100% fast, not making mistakes at the back of the grid.
Well, look, Alonso's entire brand, his whole legacy, is built on extracting maximum performance from subpar machinery.
The ultimate overachiever.
Exactly. But there is a massive psychological toll to doing that at the back of the grid. He doesn't want his final chapter in Formula One to be a montage of him making uncharacteristic errors while fighting an unstable chassis, getting lapped by cars he knows he could beat if the machinery were equal.
It's tragic.
It is. If he chooses to endure this season, he is placing a massive gamble on the 2027 development cycle.
And if he doesn't endure it, his exit strategy is spectacular. Like, the whispers in the paddock right now are heavily focused on the Dakar rally.
Which would be amazing.
Right. Winning Dakar would make him the first driver to conquer the World Endurance Championship, Formula One, and Rally Raid.
History making.
There is also significant momentum behind a return to Le Mans, with the very real possibility of him sharing a seat with Max Verstappen.
The dream team. Look, the allure of a guaranteed competitive seat in endurance racing is incredibly strong when you contrast it with the current state of his AMR 26.
Totally.
But what is perhaps more damaging to Formula One than Alonso leaving is the specific technical critique he is leveling against the sport on his way out.
Oh, right.
His frustration isn't just isolated to Honda's specific failures. He is heavily criticizing the fundamental philosophy of the 2026 regulations, specifically this phenomenon of clipping.
Okay, so what does this all mean? Let's break down clipping for a second, because this goes to the heart of what racing actually is.
Yep.
Under these new regulations, there is a massive shift toward electrical power. The internal combustion engine and the electrical system are effectively splitting the power output 50-50.
And because the electrical demand is so incredibly high, the cars run out of deployable energy long before the end of a straightaway.
They just drain the battery.
They drain it completely. When the MGUK battery depletes, the car instantly loses hundreds of horsepower, the aerodynamic drag takes over, and the car physically stops accelerating, or even decelerates, while the driver is still at full throttle.
Which is insane to think about.
That is clipping. To prevent this from happening at the end of a high-speed zone where you are, most vulnerable to being passed by someone behind you, the drivers have to artificially manipulate their energy harvesting.
Which means doing something completely counterintuitive. Intentionally driving slower through the corners.
Yep.
They have to lift off the throttle in the traction zones, totally sacrificing pure mechanical grip and cornering speed just to regenerate enough electrical energy to survive the next straight.
That's wild.
You have Fernando Alonso, a driver whose entire career was built on carrying impossible momentum through apexes being ordered by his race engineer to intentionally suppress his speed.
And it creates a philosophical crisis for the sport. Formula One drivers are neurologically wired to seek the absolute limit of adhesion at every millimeter of the track.
It's what makes them who they are.
Exactly. When the regulations force them to overwrite those instincts to drive a corner at 80% capacity purely to satisfy a battery algorithm, you are no longer testing the limits of human performance. You are testing the efficiency of a software deployment map.
It's just a math equation at that point.
It is. It's tragic.
Man. We started this deep dive looking at a single catastrophic engine failure in Sakura, but peeling back the layers reveals a sport entirely at war with its own complexity.
Yeah, without a doubt.
You have a power unit vibrating so violently it requires the sacrifice of a physical chassis just to diagnose.
Yep.
You have a secret regulatory bailout designed to prevent a corporate walkout, which is actively being hijacked by Ferrari to bypass the budget cap. It's a mess. And at the center of it all, you have a generational talent contemplating a move to the desert, because the rules of Formula One are forcing him to drive slowly on purpose.
It really forces us to take a hard look at the trajectory of the FIA's regulatory ambition.
Seriously.
Engineering a highly efficient 50-50 hybrid power unit is, a phenomenal technical achievement on paper.
Sure, for a road car.
Right. But if that achievement requires compounding financial bailouts, creates undrivable harmonics, and forces the fastest drivers on Earth to lift in the corners, the sport has lost the plot.
It really has.
Yeah.
Which leaves you with a deeply unsettling question to carry into the rest of the season. If the absolute pinnacle of motorsport has engineered a formula so dizzyingly complex that the largest engine manufacturer in the world cannot solve it, and the drivers who do have working engines are forced to actively suppress their racing instincts, has Formula One accidentally engineered the actual racing out of the sport?
It's a great question.
It is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the telemetry, keep digging into the details, and we'll catch you on the next one.